The bombs that continue to kill almost half a century after they were dropped during Vietnam, America's longest and most traumatic war. During that campaign, 270 million explosives fell on the neighbouring country of Laos. Generations later, school children are living with the deadly legacy. Tonight, we have a special report from our senior international correspondent.
In the past, villagers have tried to defuse bombs like this using pickaxes and shovels, and all too often, it's ended in disaster.
This is ITV News at 10 with Raghi Omar.
Good evening. It is perhaps hard to believe that a war which finished more than 46 years ago is still killing people all this time later. It's less hard to understand when you realise that during the Vietnam War, a scarcely believable 250 million bombs were dropped on the neighbouring country of Laos, making it the most bombed place in the world. Millions remain unexploded and hidden. Tonight we report from Laos on the deadly legacy. During the Vietnam War, a crucial North Vietnamese supply line ran through eastern Laos known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail. To disrupt this, the Americans dropped around 270 million bombs on Laos between 1964 and 1973, more than it used in the entire Second World War. But many didn't go off. By the end of the Vietnam War, around 80 million unexploded bombs were left scattered across Laos. And there's been a terrible human cost. Since then, 20,000 people have been killed by unexploded devices, almost half of them children, and that killing is still going on.
On the face of it, Cam Ranh province in central Laos is idyllic, a place where geography and nature have combined beautifully. But you just have to scratch the surface to discover all isn't quite as it seems. For the pupils of Vang Con Village School, the day begins in the playground with a wash in a crater made by an American bomb during the Vietnam War. Then it's time for the first lesson of the day. It's part history and part survival. A British charity called the Mines Advisory Group, or MAG for short, has come to the school to tell the children why a war that ended 46 years ago is still a threat to them. When they're shown pictures of the various bombs they should be aware of, 10-year-old Vieng comes forward to identify the ones that he recognizes. Asked where he saw them, the boy walks just a few feet and points to a high-explosive fragmentation bomb lying in the playground. After all this time, it's hard to spot. It's called a BLU-26, and if it's moved or played with, it's potentially lethal. And there's more. Just beyond the school fence in the forest, the boy shows them a second bomb, and then a third. Soon a MAG ordnance disposal team is called in. The children looked on from a safe distance. This was the practical part of today's lesson. Between 1964 and 1973, the CIA directed a secret war that saw American planes drop 270 million pieces of ordnance on Laos, which makes it the most bombed country on Earth. And this is what the American bombers were trying to put out of action. This is part of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It's quiet today, but during the war it was in constant use. This was the essential logistical corridor that allowed the North Vietnamese to keep their forces in South Vietnam fully supplied. The problem is that roughly a third of the ordnance dropped by the Americans failed to detonate. The Vietnam War's legacy in Laos was an estimated 80 million unexploded bombs. One of them killed 2 of their sons. The boys, aged 7 and 9, found a cluster bomb in the forest. Their father said that recently, when they were working in the fields, he was horrified when he turned around to see 3-year-old Nate playing with a cluster bomb he'd picked up, thinking it was a stone. During the war, the villagers of Cam Wan endured terrible hardships as they retreated into caves to survive. This was the only sanctuary to be found, as outside the bombs rained down. This woman told me that when the war ended and they left their cave, her husband retrieved aluminium remnants of the air raids, bits of downed planes and spent ordnance. According to an old sticker, her cladding was made by the US weapons manufacturer Northrop. The label on this bucket has instructions about the setting of fuses. This canoe was originally a drop tank on an American warplane. Walking through a landscape of craters, we were shown yet more unexploded bombs, and they weren't all cluster munitions. This is one of 8 500-pound bombs they've found so far this year, and the experts from MAG are about to make it safe, not least to save the locals from themselves. In the past, villagers have tried to defuse bombs like this using pickaxes and shovels, and all too often it's ended in disaster. During our time with the bomb disposal team, we lost count of the number of controlled explosions they had to initiate. Since they came to Laos 25 years ago, MAG and other clearance experts saving lives here have dealt with about 1,400,000 bombs, which leaves roughly 78.5 million to go. John Irvine, News at 10, Cam Wan Province, in central Laos.
And John Irvine is now back on his base in the Tel Aviv bureau. John, it's a terrible legacy, as you were sort of describing there, that still lives on. I suppose the question that viewers will want to know is, 270 million bombs the Americans dropped. What are they doing about it now?
Raggy, I think the figures speak volumes. It's 46 years since the war ended, and yet just 2% of the 80 million unexploded bombs in Laos have been dealt with. In the immediate post-war period, the Americans did next to nothing, not least because they didn't want to help an enemy. Not only did their huge bombing campaign during the war fail to knock out the Ho Chi Minh Trail, it failed to prevent Laos from becoming a communist country, which it did in 1975. And after that, the Americans weren't inclined to help them clear unexploded bombs. Consequently, it wasn't until 2016 that Barack Obama became the first US president to visit Laos, when he pledged $90 million in aid for clearance operations. Now, Raggy, over the last decade, the number of accidents and fatalities in Laos has gone down, but that's not due to any great reduction in bomb numbers. It's because of greater awareness and because no longer do local people in Laos try to harvest these bombs to sell as scrap metal. Nonetheless, the development of Laos continues to be stunted by the presence of millions of these things, and I'm afraid it'll be hundreds of years before Laos is rid of this widespread menace.
That's quite a thought. Johnny, thank you very much indeed. John Irvine reporting from Laos, now back in Tel Aviv.